So for today, it's seeded plants and plant form. And so, well, actually, let me go back to that. That picture that we have in the front, those are all types of seeds. They come in different colors, they have different textures, but really the purpose of a seed, it's just kind of like a baby, right? It's just this little baby, and all that it needs is a little bit of water, and then it will germinate, and then it turns into a plant. And so we're going to kind of look at the properties of the seed, but also plants that come from seeds. So that's kind of what we're going to go over today. Last time that we met and we talked about seedless plants, we talked about that they came from the ocean and they came from algae. So you kind of have this progression of algae from the ocean, unicellular, and it's not a plant, and then how plants evolved from algae. Some of the examples that we gave last week were like moss, and you can kind of tell that moss is more or less advanced because moss is really, really short. It doesn't have true roots, has what we call rhizoids. And then also another big thing is that they don't have seeds, they have spores. So today what we're talking about is seeds. And Justin, it's okay. My internet kind of goes in and out. So also if you all kind of hear like it lagging, let me know in the chat so that I can repeat what I'm saying. But also, Justin, I'm recording this, so if you miss anything, I'll upload it on YouTube. So, but yeah, so back to the plants, how they kind of progressed out from the ocean, and then really it says there that the success of seeded plants is basically the seed. So a seed is kind of like a protection. When we were talking about spores, we said that spores needed water so that the sperm can get to the female part. But with seeds, you don't. They're just this enclosed with a seed coat, and they can live for hundreds or thousands of years, which is actually really cool. And then I have a picture. So I took this, well, I have the date there. I took this in February of 2020. It's at the ag farm. And I'm curious, does anybody have an animal that you have there at the ag farm? Like I know people, like if you're in FFA or 4-H, you can have a goat or a sheep. What else do they have? Cows, they have rabbits, they have chickens. Anybody have an animal there at the ag farm? Or you know of somebody that raises animals maybe? Y'all can speak up, it's okay. Anybody have an animal, or they know of a classmate that has an animal there? You have a friend that has a goat. Justin, do they have their goat there? So at your campus, they don't have an ag teacher, but at the other comprehensive campuses, like there's Bears, Southwest, North, like all of those other high schools, they have an ag teacher, and then they also have an FFA chapter, and you can have an animal that you raise and then they sell it to the meat market, which is very sad. But you can have your animal stay there. Like let's say you live in the city and you don't have any place to, raise a pig. You can have it here at the ag farm, and it's safe there. You just go every morning and afternoon to feed it. But this is the new ag farm. They had the older one. I don't remember the road, but this is the newer one. And so I took this picture just kind of like so you can see, like this is after they kind of bulldozed everything. You can see how it looks in the back. They have the like mesquite trees, like that's how it should look. But then they got rid of everything and you just have bare dirt. But really what I wanted to show you is kind of how there can still be seeds under there that have been there for hundreds of years, and once they get a little bit of water, they're able to germinate. And so let me go to the next slide. So the ones on the left in this picture, those I planted those with a few other kids. That's Indian blanket and blue bonnet, right? Those, if you ever drive down Texas highways, those you'll see those. The one on the right is actually a native. So that one we didn't plant. So that one we know that the seeds were already there in the soil and they just were able to, sprout if they had a little bit of water. That's one thing. Another thing could be maybe you had seed dispersal, like maybe a bird brought a seed over. That happens too. And then I have, I think, one more picture. Let me see. See, this one on the left is called a meliote. That one I feel like that one was there in the soil and it just needed, I guess, a little bit of time to come out. What I was told about this ag farm was that it used to be, I think, kind of like a junkyard. It was a junkyard, and then they removed all of the trash, and so all of this soil was not exposed to the sun or water or anything. And then once they removed all of that and kind of plowed it, it's kind of getting a second chance to I guess, come about. We call that, maybe you've heard of those terms, primary and secondary succession, kind of like how nature restores itself. I wasn't going to talk about this, but now that I guess we're talking about the blue bonnets and the Indian blanket, when you drive on the Texas highways, there's this one man, and his business is called Native American Seed. Let me put it in the chat. And so this one like soul man is the purpose, or not the purpose, he's the reason why you have all of these beautiful flowers along Texas highways. Mrs. Lady Bird Johnson, which was wife to one of our presidents, President Johnson, this was like her thing, that she wanted Texas highways to have blue bonnets, Indian blanket, the Mexican hat, like all of those. And so they sourced them from this one man. And he like, how does he do it? He only sells seeds. It's kind of cool, right? Can you imagine that that's your job, that's your livelihood? You just have seeds, and he only has native flowers. That's his specialty. But if you ever see these along the Texas highways, they all come from this one man, which is pretty cool. And I know his name is Bill. I think it's Bill. Can't remember his last name, but very sweet man. I got to meet him one time, and he's very, very sweet. Okay. So now we're looking at what a seed actually looks like on the inside. And so we said before that it's kind of like a baby. It's a little bit different though. Like if you think of a baby inside of a human, they have to get through nutrition from their mom. Whereas a seed doesn't. The seed has all of the energy inside of it. And some seeds have more energy. Like if you were to eat something kind of like a peanut has a lot more oil, and so we know that oil has a lot more energy. So some seeds have more energy than others, but you're going to find that in and I have it labeled here, the endosperm. That's their food source. And so when you think about a seed, they're underground, and so plants need to photosynthesize to make their own food, but a seed doesn't have any leaves, so it can't photosynthesize. So how is it going to get its energy? It has to get it within the seed itself. And then once the seed germinates, then it grows leaves, and then it can photosynthesize. So the initial storage or food storage does come within the seed, and we call that the endosperm. The seed coat, we mentioned earlier, that's its protection. That's how the seeds are able to survive hundreds or thousands of years. So that's pretty cool. As far as gametophytes, I want you to think of gametophytes. When you see the word gameto, you need to think of like gametes. So gametes are sex cells. So that's meiosis, right? Mitosis is identical cells. Meiosis is sex cells, the male and female. So whenever you see the word gametophyte, you just need to think gametes or sex cells. The difference between the seeded plants and seedless, for one, is that these don't need any water for the male gametophyte to go to the female gametophyte. Usually they will use, and they have it here on the screen, you're going to use wind or a pollinator. So when we talk about pollinators, those can be things like butterflies, bats, birds, insects, even humans. It could happen. Like that you touch a flower and then you touch another flower, and so that's how you're able to pollinate. So those are pollinators. For the girl, she's gonna, what does it say, develop within an ovule, and in a little bit I'll show you the flower anatomy and the another part so you can kind of see the difference between the female and the male part. These things that I have bolded are very important. They're going to be in your test, so just make sure that you kind of look at those. And the last one says that the ovary is what develops into a fruit. Okay. These are different types of seeded plants. On the screen, can you tell me which one of these 5 phyla, which one has the most species? So again, from this picture, which phyla has the most species? You can put it in the chat if you need to. Which phyla has the most species in this picture? Alondra, try again. Try again. Second time. Okay, good. Anthophyta. Yeah, so very good. So if you see the Anthophyta and then next to it, it says angiosperms. So the angiosperms are flowering plants, anything that flowers. Grass. Typically we cut grass so we don't really see the flower, but if you were to let grass grow, you'll be able to see the flower. Olive trees have flowers. There's so many types of flowering plants. So that's the one that has the most species from seeded plants. And then there's one that only has 1 species. Which one is it? From this picture, which phyla only has 1 species? Okay, very good. So the ginkgos or the Ginkgophyta, those only have 1 species. And I think it's the Japanese. The Japanese are the ones that have preserved that one phyla. It's kind of crazy. So all of these have died off except for 1 species, and that's because the Japanese really value that plant. And I have a picture that I'll show you in a second, I think. It's in one of these slides, and you'll get to see what the ginkgo looks like. So from all of those that we saw in the previous slide, let me go back. These first 4, the conifers, the cycads, the cnidophytes, and the ginkgophytes, those are all what we call gymnosperms. And so what a gymnosperm is that it has a seed, but it's a naked seed. So it's just exposed and it doesn't have a seed coat. So the way that they're protected is typically that they'll be inside of a cone. And so that's another trait that we kind of, I guess, pin with gymnosperms, is that they have cones. And let me see, I feel like I had a picture somewhere. Well, let me get through this really quickly. I know I did put a picture for you guys. So when we see this word conifers or Coniferophyta, that's another phylum. Conifer means cone. So anything that has a cone is what we consider to be a conifer. And they have some examples for you. The pines, spruces, firs, so things like Christmas trees, those are all going to be conifers. And then they give you the tallest one, which is the coastal redwoods, and those you'll find in California. I'm not sure if they are also above California. I'm sure they are, like in Oregon and Washington, but they're on that side of the U.S. And another thing about these is that they are, what's it called? They are softwood. If you ever go to Lowe's or Home Depot, maybe you've gone with your parents, the woods vary in price. So anything that's a softwood, like a spruce or a pine, is much cheaper than a hardwood like mesquite or oak. And that's just because these take a lot less time to grow. They don't really invest any time or as much time in the root system. They just kind of grow straight up, really tall, and that's it. So that's why these are a little bit less expensive than a hardwood. And it's just because they take a little bit longer to grow. Well, the hardwoods do. Pines, let's see in the chat. Where in Texas can you find pines or pine trees? Anybody know? Can you think of in Texas where, because we do have them in Texas. Where in Texas do we have pine trees? Take a guess. Do you think it's in the Panhandle, East Texas? We know it's not South Texas. West Texas. What part of Texas do we find pine trees? So it is in the upper part, but it's not in the Panhandle. The Panhandle is like Amarillo and Lubbock, and there's like nothing there. I went to school up there, and it's like a dust bowl. So, but you're gonna find these trees in the Houston area, and then, so what is that, northeast? So Houston, Beaumont, and north of that, Natchitoches, I think, you'll find a lot of pine trees. It's actually really pretty. So in the north and eastern part of Texas is where we're gonna start to see our pine trees. And they have, I think they're called loblolly pine trees. And so here's the picture I wanted to show you earlier. So this is what cones look like, and I'm sure you've seen them before. But maybe you didn't know that there's different types. There is a boy and a girl cone. And so the one that we typically see, like that people keep as souvenirs, are going to be the female cones. That they have the kind of like blades or scales that kind of open up. So when it's a younger cone and it's a girl, it's going to be all closed up. And then once it matures and opens up, then the seeds are exposed, and then that male cone has pollen. So pollen is pretty much like the sperm. So the sperm in the pollen either is like wind dispersed, more than likely it's going to be wind dispersal, and it'll go and it'll somehow find the female seed, and that's how it's able to fertilize it, and then you can get a new tree from that. And then in the picture above, I wanted to show you where you find them. So for the boy cones, you're going to find them more so on the bottom part of the tree, and then the female cones will be on the top. So that's something that most people aren't really aware of, like the boy and the female cones. But that's kind of how that works. And so that's kind of different. And it's kind of different for us because we don't really have pine trees. I don't think I've seen one. I'm sure people have them like that they planted in their yard. I typically don't see any trees like this here in our area, so might be why we're not really too familiar with it, but just know that there's a boy cone and a girl cone. And then here's kind of a description of kind of how the reproductive process happens. So you have your tree, and then on the left of it you have the pollen-bearing cone. So we know that that's the boy. So the pollen is the sperm, well, it has sperm, and then that's the boy part, and then the ovule is the girl cone. And so through wind dispersal, more than likely, that's how you're going to have the pollination occur. And one really big thing that I need to note is that pollination and fertilization are not the same. And also in the picture, you can see that they're in two separate parts. So the pollination happens before, and then after is where you'll have fertilization. So pollination is just that the pollen does go inside of the female part, and then after a while, then the pollen and the sperm, they're able to, I guess, fertilize and create a zygote. And so what's really interesting is that look how long it takes for it to actually turn into a zygote. It takes 15 months, so over a year. For over a year, you're finally going to have fertilization, which is kind of crazy. So, but the biggest takeaway is that pollination and fertilization, they're not the same thing. Pollination is just that the pollen is able to get to the female part, and then fertilization is when you actually are able to create a zygote, which is like creating a baby. That's what a zygote is a baby. And so that's kind of how that process occurs. And we went over this last time, but actually I want to bring that up again. When you see the N, that equals haploid. Haploid, and 2N is diploid. Haploid and diploid. So haploid is one set of chromosomes and diploid is two sets of chromosomes. So diploid is that you have the chromosomes from mom and dad, and so that's why you have two sets, one from mom, one from dad. I know you all have seen these before. We do have these here. A lot of people have them in their front yards. They look like palm trees, but they're not palm trees. Some people call them false palm trees. Palm trees are flowering plants. They have it's like a white flower, and maybe you've seen it before, but they do flower. These are not palm trees. They're called cycads. They're from like the dinosaurs. Like they're that ancient. They're really hard. If you've ever felt the leaves, they're very like needle-like and just, I don't know. I'm not sure why people like them. I mean, I guess they're okay. But in the middle, they have a really large cone. And so anything that has a cone, we know that to be a gymnosperm. So I don't know if you all have seen these. Does anybody have these in their yard or maybe in your grandma's yard or anybody like that? I don't. But I know my neighbors have these. And I actually don't know the name. Like, I don't know the name. Like, if you were to go to Lowe's, like the name of the plant, I don't know. I just know it as a cycad. False palm, maybe. I'm not sure. But yeah, they're very common here. They're probably no taller than 3 to 4 feet. I think some can get a little bit bigger, but they're relatively short. They look like palms, but they're not actual palms. So just wanted to throw that one out there. This one we don't have here, and it's a very rare type of plant. The needlephytes or needlephyta. It has cones. It's part of the gymnosperm. The gymnosperms, and another trait about this is that it smells bad. And I know that's not on the slide, but I know that's like a trait, is they kind of smell bad, and I'm not sure why. But and then here's the one that we talked about earlier. So this is the one that's really important to the Japanese, and so they're the reason why there's still one left, or one species left of this plant, the neophytes, the ginkgophytes. Sorry, ginkgo. I don't know how to say that. Biloba. They're really pretty though. So wanted to throw that picture out there so y'all can see it, and we can thank the Japanese for preserving it. So those were all the gymnosperms. Gymnosperms are naked seeds. They have cones. And so now we're going into angiosperms. Angiosperms are flowering plants. So these are going to be the ones that have the most species. They're also the most diverse. And what we know about flowering plants also is that they do create a fruit. And sometimes those fruits are different from what we kind of perceive as a fruit. Like for fruit, we think of apples and pears, but there's some other things that are fruits that are not fruits, in, I guess, in our head, like rice. Rice is considered to be a fruit. What's another one that's kind of weird? Almonds. Almonds are considered to be a fruit. So like if you're drinking almond milk, it's, I guess, almond juice. So I don't know. But anything that has flower does produce a fruit. And in this slide, they kind of talk about how we don't really know the origins of angiosperms. We just know that they are the most recent ones as far as plants go. And I think what does it say? The emergence of angiosperms changed the terrain. Previously dominated by ferns, cycads, and conifers, unique angiosperm features aided abundance, flower production, insect pollination. And another thing that's not on this slide that's really important though, is that these plants did co-evolve with our current insects. Like they're codependent on each other. The flowering plant does need a pollinator, a bee, whatever it may be, butterfly. So they have special adaptations that both of them, or I guess that a plant has, because it does need to get pollinated. So can you think of some things? Let me put it in the chat. Like what attracts a pollinator? Let me see. Go ahead and put it in the chat, guys. What attracts a pollinator? If you are a flower or a flowering plant, whatever it may be, what is it that's going to attract a pollinator? Yeah, one could be color. Very good that it's brightly colored. Anything else? Scent is another one. Is there anything else that you can think of? Color, scent, smell, very good. What else? Can't really think of any other ones than that. Yeah, the way it looks is true too. Which is true to us as well. So I'm sure you all are aware of, like, not all animals can see the same colors. Like dogs, I think dogs can see, they don't see black and white. They see, I think, like yellow. I don't know, like, but they can't see color as vibrantly as we can. They can see a few colors, but it's not the same as us. And so what that really tells us, as far as like evolution wise, is that we really are, um, what's the word I want to use? Like when, like collecting fruit. I don't know what, like foragers. There we go. Like foraging. Like even when you go to the grocery store, when you choose your fruit, you base it off of how it looks, as far as how deeply rich in color it is, like that it's not all like, I don't know, bruised or whatever. So, and that's something that's inherent or instinctive to us and other animals as well, like birds too. Birds and other insects, there's certain colors that really attract us. And so that's how these plants have adapted to that. Somehow along the line, they have these vibrant colors and these scents that they know are able to attract a pollinator. And so that's kind of cool. That's instinctive in us, and that's what I mean about how we've co-evolved with the plants. So that's something to think about. And also when we're talking about colors, there are some animals that can't see any colors, and those would be things like the like carnivores, right? Like cats. Cats don't really see vibrant colors, and they're purely carnivorous. They wouldn't really, to them, it wouldn't benefit that they need to see bright, I don't know, yellow and all of that. So that kind of goes into the pigments in your eyes. Kind of cool. Okay, so here I've got a phylogenetic tree. And so this just kind of shows you the progression of plants that we have now. Our angiosperms are going to be the most recently developed. Gymnosperms came before. Those are all our cones. Angiosperms are our flowering plants. The last one on the right says monocot. Monocots are going to be things like corn and wheat. Those are monocots. But they still are flowering plants because they're in that angiosperm group. Okay. So I've got a picture of a flower, and you all already mentioned a little bit about how, like, what is it that attracts a pollinator, and you all said color and all of that. It's very true. So like flowers can have a really nice scent. Like right now in my backyard, I have a mountain laurel. It only blooms once a year, and it's blooming right now. And as soon as I come home, like I can smell it. It's just a beautiful scent. Same with jasmine. There's certain flowers that you can smell them like from a distance, and that does attract a pollinator. And that's because flowers cannot pollinate themselves. They do need the help of a pollinator. And so in this picture, the boy part is going to be the anther and the filament, which is what we call the stamen. And so that's where the pollen comes from. And then, yeah, orange, the citrus trees is probably one of my favorites. Those smell really good. And so, but that is to attract a pollinator so that they can come. And so when pollinators come, they don't come because, they don't come to pollinate. They come because the flower, it produces a really sweet nectar. And so the nectar is only produced to attract a pollinator. There's no other reason for it. And so, but what will happen indirectly is that a bee or whatever will come, get the nectar, get some of the pollen all over its body, and then by luck, it's able to go through the stigma, which is that, I'm not sure if y'all see that in the center. The stigma is that tip. It goes to the stigma, down the style, and then eventually it goes into the ovary, and then that's how the fruit is able to form. So the fruit comes out of that center part, the ovary. The ovary is what's going to turn into a fruit. So again, the boy part is the anther, the filament, the stamen, that's where the pollen is, and then the girl part is pretty much the center. And so that's kind of how that works. And then here I just have another picture. This one might be a little bit better, but so you can kind of see just the boy part and then the girl part in the center. This is a typical flower. Not all flowers look like this, because you can have some flowers that only have boy parts and then some that only have girl parts. And they do really, really need the help of a pollinator to get the pollen from a tree nearby and then bring it to a girl tree. So you can have that too, where you have just girl trees and boy trees. That's also something that exists. So here's how they reproduce. I mean, it's kind of similar. Let's see. There's only one thing that I really wanted to highlight on this slide. I mean, we talked about how the pollen does go down the stigma to the style all the way to the ovary, but on the very bottom of the picture, excuse me, there's this term called double fertilization. And so on the next slide, I'm going to go a little bit more into that. But so double fertilization. So you can kind of see it. So here I have a whole slide. So this one will be on your exam. Well, I mean, so this one for sure, you're going to have a question on double fertilization. So just heads up. It says the joining of a female gametophyte, so that's the girl sex cell, with two male gametes. It begins when pollen grain adheres to the stigma of the carpel and the female reproductive structure of the flower. And then on the bottom it says, one sperm fertilizes the egg to make the zygote, which is the baby. So one is designated to make a baby plant, and then the other one is what's going to make the endosperm. So what endosperm was, we talked about that earlier, that's the food. So the food that the seed needs to be able to germinate. So again, it's called double fertilization because one fertilizes the egg to turn into the zygote, and then the other one turns into the food or the endosperm. So that's what we mean by double fertilization. Yeah, they should. They do. Because all of these slides I get straight from your textbook, and the smart books are based on the textbook. But if you have a question, you can just put it in the chat. That's okay, Angel. No worries. And then I'm recording it, Angel, so if you need to refer back, you can go to the YouTube video. That's fine. The seed coat, we mentioned this earlier, it's the outer protective layer. And so this is just so that the seed is protected and it's not going to germinate until it gets some water. And then there it says some seeds can stay alive for thousands of years, which is kind of crazy that seeds can do that. And so that's why maybe you all have heard about seed banks. I mean, it kind of is, maybe you've heard of other things too, like some people will freeze their eggs or freeze their sperm. It's like the same thing. Some seeds we will just take from plants that we feel are like really special. They could be endangered plants, and so we just kind of harvest their seeds, and so that we can germinate them and try to repopulate them as best as we can. When we talk about the word germination, how do I reword that? That's just that the seed, I guess, sprouts. So when you hear that word germinating, that's just that the seed is sprouting and it's going to turn into a new baby plant. And on this slide, they just kind of wanted to highlight that there's certain mechanisms that are needed before it can germinate. Like for this one, it says that it needs fire. So this pine cone, it will not open unless it's exposed to some fire, and then it finally will open. So you all might be a little bit too young, but they used to run, what's it called? Commercials. They used to run commercials on Smokey Bear. And he would be like, what is it? You can prevent forest fires? What is it? Only you can, I think it's like that. Only you can prevent forest fires. Have y'all seen that before? He has like a shovel and like a hat. Has anybody seen them? Maybe not the commercial, but I don't know if it's, I've seen some people with shirts on it. But so that was like a campaign because he was a real bear. And his name was Smokey. Smokey, and they don't say Smokey the bear. They're like, no, it's not Smokey the bear, it's Smokey Bear, whatever. But it was a bear that was rescued from a fire, and so they had this campaign, like, like that we should stop having all these fires, and so only you can prevent them. Like, stop piling up a bunch of shrubs, and I don't know. But so what we saw from that was that plants like this that actually need the fire were not able to germinate. And so there was some issues with that. And another issue too was that because we suppressed fire for so long, if you suppress it, then you have a bunch of fuel. And so if lightning does strike, then the fire is not going to be just, a fire. It's going to be just a huge fire. And so that's something that we're now learning, is that we need to have fires. And so they will do what we call prescribed burns. Well, they'll just have like little sections, I don't know how many acres, and they will burn those to kind of mimic a natural fire. And so those are practices that they do at the forest. What are they called? Like park rangers and those people, which is kind of a cool job. Can you imagine? How fun that they're just out in the woods, burning the woods. Maybe that's a job that one of y'all want to do. You can be a park ranger. I'm sure that's probably one of the most relaxing jobs. Can you imagine? You're just in nature all day. They don't pay as much, but I feel like your spirit will be happy. So I don't know. That's something to consider. So another thing too is how these seeds can get dispersed, and all that dispersed means that they're moved. So like I'm sure you all know well, actually, let me put this in the chat. Why do plants make fruits? Why do plants make fruits? Like, what is the benefit? What does the plant get out of that? Why would a plant make a fruit? Investing all of this energy to make a fruit. Why? What's the purpose? Okay, very good. So it's so that they can pass their genetics on. They're a tree. They can't move, or a plant. They cannot move. So they have figured out a way to have their genes move without them actually moving. So one of the ways that they can do it is that they can make a fruit, and then they will attract somebody to come. They'll make it really pretty, smell really good. Someone will come and take my fruit, and then they take my genetics along with them. And so that seed coat is able to break down in the animal's digestive system. The animal will poop it out, and then some rain will come, and then that seed is able to germinate somewhere else. And so that's what the purpose of fruit is so that the genetics can get passed on. So it's really interesting. And here they have other ways. Let's see. Hitching a ride with hooked spines on animals. Okay. Burial in catches by herbivores, blowing in the wind, floating and drifting on water. So kind of cool. So, but that's the purpose of the fruits. I have some pictures of different types of fruits. This is a berry, which is a tomato. I know we don't really think of that as a berry, but that's one. A legume. A legume is going to be things. Here's you've got peas. What's another popular legume? A native tree, Texas ebony. They have what we call pods, and maybe you've seen them. They're just like these big black things. You know what? What's another one? I think tamarindo. Tamarindo. I'm sure. Do you all eat tamarindo? But the actual tamarindo, which is like it's in a pod. That's a legume as well. So yeah, anything that comes like in a pod is what we call a legume. That's kind of interesting. Drupes are going to be things that have a single pit. So like a cherry, here it says peaches, plums. I would say even a mango, like if you like mango, it has just a single pit. That would be one too. I don't know what the samaras is. I've never seen that. A fruit does not split. Wing forms, I'm not sure what that is. That's very interesting. So those are different types of fruits. And then this one is kind of cool, like the spinas. This just kind of shows how they can disperse differently, which is kind of different.
And here's another way that they can, I'm sure you all have seen the dandelion. That's how they can distribute their genetics using the wind. So where am I at? Let's take like a 2 to 3 minute break, and then we will come right back. Okay, let's come back at like at 5:20. Take a short little break really quick. If you need to get up and stretch, I do. So I'll be right back in like 2 to 3 minutes. That's okay. Okay. I just needed like a water break. We're back. How many slides do I have? Okay, I don't have that many more. I have like less than 10. But as of right now, do you all have any questions over the stuff that we went over? It's on so it's just on the plants, Sydney. So that's chapter 29, 30, and 35. So that's going to be seedless plants, seeded plants, and the plant form. And so okay, so then let's keep going. We are almost done. This is the plant form part. So this is just like the anatomy of a plant. And so this specifically is going to be to plants that actually have
like more developed tissues. Like you will not find a structure like this in a bryophyte, and a bryophyte is something like a moss or a hornwort. So they don't have roots, they don't have stems, so they don't have these tissues that are, I guess, much more advanced that you would find in something like a tree. You wouldn't find these structures in something like moss. So there's different types of tissues: the dermal, the ground, and the vascular tissue. And I think I have a slide just on vascular tissue, which I guess we'll get to in a little bit. So this picture is a root and a root tip. When you zoom in, and you can't see it here, but if you were to keep zooming in, you would see a lot of cells undergoing mitosis. So mitosis is the prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. And so that's just because roots they're kind of actively growing a lot, just all the time. They're always searching for water. And so at the root tip is where you're going to see a lot of cell division, just constant growth, constant growth. And in this picture, which is cool, they have highlighted the 3 types of tissues: the dermal in green, the ground, and the vascular. So that's kind of a neat picture to kind of see. Another thing too is that roots are typically white, and so that's because the sun doesn't penetrate the soil. So these do not have chloroplasts. These are not photosynthetic, and that's because they're underground, and so that's why they're not green, which is also something to remember. So anything above ground is green and photosynthetic. Anything below the soil is white, and it doesn't photosynthesize. So also things like onions. If onions grow underground, and what color are they? They're white because they don't have any chlorophyll. What else is white underground? I'm trying to think. I guess potatoes too. Potatoes are typically white. So that's just something to think about. When you see the words apical or lateral, that just means kind of the direction. So the apical meristem is going to be on top, and then the lateral can be on the side or going down. And there's different and I know you've seen these pictures, I think, in your lab work. So maybe you've seen some of these before, like the vascular cambium. For sure, I hope that you all know what the xylem and the phloem is. So let me put those in the chat. Those will be on your test. So when we talk about things like the vascular tissue, we're mostly talking about the xylem and the phloem. The xylem is going to move water and minerals, and it's going to move it from the roots all the way to the shoot, which is out through the leaf, through the stomata. The phloem is going to move sugars. So the leaves are the ones that photosynthesize, and they make glucose, and then that sugar is able to go all throughout the plant, and it is able to do that through the phloem tissue. So vascular tissue, we mostly talk about xylem and phloem. So those are the 2 that I really, really need you to remember. Again, back to the 3 main types of tissues. For dermal, it's on the external part of the plant, and it's a protective layer. For ground, it's internal, and it helps photosynthesize as well as store food, and also for structural support. And then the vascular is going to be your, like what we talked about earlier, like the xylem. So on the screen, sorry, I need to sneeze. Ooh. On the screen I have a picture of a stomata, and we talked about it last time. I had asked y'all where on the plant would you find a stomata, because they're not everywhere. Does anyone that was here last time, does anyone remember where do you find a stomata on a plant? Let's see. There's multiple, but where can you find the stomatas? Yeah, very good. Under the leaf. So on the underside of the leaf, there's a bunch of like pores, and this is where they're able to do the gas exchange. So as we know, plants, they do let out oxygen, but they also take in carbon dioxide. And so the way that they're able to get that air is through these little holes. And so those are on the underside of the leaf. There's a few plants that actually have them on the top side, and those are going to be things like, I think water lilies, because those are aquatic plants and they sit on top of the water. So it doesn't make sense that they would have the stomata just drowning in water. So they actually have their stomata on top of the lily pad, which is a cool adaptation. But for the most part, most plants have them on the underside of the leaf. Again, with the stomata, there's these two specialized cells that we call the guard cells, and so those are responsible for opening and closing the stomata. So they will close if the plant is under like a stress, and so the plant should not be letting out water vapor or letting out oxygen, and it'll kind of close it. So this is kind of a, what are they called? Like a feedback mechanism. What is it? Negative feedback mechanism, where it's a response to the environment is how that works. So that's kind of cool. On this picture, they also kind of show you that they have chloroplasts, so that means that they're photosynthetic. So these we mentioned earlier. So the xylems is going to be something that moves water, and it moves it again against gravity. So it moves it from the roots and against gravity and then goes up. For the phloem, it's going to go the opposite direction. It goes down, but it also goes everywhere. Wherever the plant needs any sugar, it's able to move it through the phloem. So the xylem and the phloem are our main vascular tissues that we talk about. Here are some diagrams of leaf, I guess the way that they grow. You can have them alternate and opposite or whorled, and then I think I have another picture. Yeah, here we go. And you can have what we call a compound leaf. So like on the letter B, that's an example of a compound leaf. So that's actually one leaf. It's one leaf, and it's kind of subdivided into little baby leaves. But it's one leaf, and then each little baby leaf we call a leaflet. So that one, again, that one's a compound leaf. And then a typical tree, which is singular leaves, we call it simple leaves. So simple, undivided, and then the one on the right is a compound leaf, which is kind of cool. And then the last one, I have a question for you guys. I want you to look at this picture. So this is like a cross section, like if you were to take a leaf and you cut it, and then what it looks like in the middle. So where do you see the chloroplasts in this picture? So take a look at that picture and then let me know, where do you see the chloroplasts? I'll put it in the chat. Where do you see the chloroplasts in the picture? Good. Yeah, so within the mesophyll layer, so we had mentioned earlier that they are in the guard cell and all of that, but in this picture, do you all see in the mesophyll, which is the middle part, that there's a lot of these like green, I don't know, they kind of look like jelly beans, that there's a lot of them in these mesophyll cells. So mesophyll cells, those are known, they're known to have a lot of chloroplasts. And that's also on your exam. So just remember that. And then that's it, guys. So your test is over this lecture and then the one from last week. So if you haven't seen it, so the good thing about YouTube is that you can what's it called? You can fast forward it, I guess. So you can make it go like twice as fast. So if you don't have, I don't know, 20 minutes, you can push the fast forward and you can just hear me talking really fast, and that's good. So, but other than that, do you all have questions over what we went over today?